Reports indicate that Aaron Rodgers could be returning to practice soon, perhaps as early as this week. Is returning him to the lineup a good idea, though? I'm not so sure about it, and I'll explain why today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, November 28th, 2023, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. If you enjoy the show, subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you're listening on a podcast source and enjoy the show, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find Locked On Jets. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Today, we're going to talk about the final 6 games of the season. The Jets still do have to play out the string, and I'll offer some ideas on what I think the Jets should do going forward. As is typical with an NFL team, topic number 1 today is about the quarterback position. Very easy to miss over the weekend as we were getting over the loss to the Miami Dolphins and that disaster Hail Mary play, which will go down as one of the plays of the 2023 season. But Ian Rappaport sent out a tweet or an X or whatever you want to call it over the weekend that suggested Aaron Rodgers could return to the practice field as soon as this week. And there have been rumors swirling about this for a couple months that Aaron Rodgers is hoping to return to the field this year. And I'll be honest with you, for the most part, outside of a couple mailbag questions, I've ignored it because Rodgers suffered such a serious injury week 1 that I wasn't going to really address it. I didn't think it was worth addressing until it got real, until it got to the point where Rodgers might be returning to the practice field. And of course, many Jets fans are excited about this, and rightly so. It's been a difficult season after a very impressive start the first 6 weeks. Things have really fallen apart for the Jets since the bye. It's funny because heading into the season, we all talked about how the 6 weeks to start the season would be the toughest, and that proved to be true. And the Jets handled that better than the games that came after it. The 5 games that have come since the bye, they've played worse against opponents that frankly have not been as good. So now there's a lot of disappointment. So we're looking for anything to get excited about. And perhaps Aaron Rodgers' return to the lineup could be that. So if the Jets, you may be familiar with this because this is what happened with Dwayne Brown. Once a guy on IR is ready to start practicing, a team can let him practice for up to 3 weeks before they need to activate him to the 53-man roster. So essentially, Rodgers could return to practice, and the Jets would not need to clear a roster spot for 3 weeks. And at the end of the 3 weeks, they'd either need to clear a roster spot or he'd be out for the season. The Jets did the same thing recently with Dwayne Brown. They actually activated him late last week. So he's on the 53-man roster now. He just did not play Friday against the Dolphins. We'll see what happens with Dwayne Brown going forward. The same could happen with Rodgers, conceivably as early as this week. We'll see what happens. We'll see what comes on Wednesday, if not maybe next week. So from that point, Rodgers would have 3 weeks to practice before the Jets needed to make a final decision. Here's the thing, though, and I think I'm not alone in this. Sometimes I'll say things that are really controversial that I know a lot of people are going to agree with. I think there are going to be a lot of people who agree with me on this one. I just don't know that it's a great idea to bring Rodgers back to the lineup this year. And a lot of it has to do with the state of the team. A lot of it has to do with the way the offensive line looks. And some of it's just sometimes you have to protect the player from himself. Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest players to ever set foot on a football field. And one of the reasons he gotten to that point, one of the reasons he's been such an icon is he believes he can do anything. And that's true of all the great athletes. They think that no obstacle is insurmountable. They think that they can conquer any challenge put in front of them. And that's a good thing. That's how you get to be a great NFL player. You can't have any fear. But sometimes the team must step in and save the player from himself. And when I look at Rodgers right now, of course, the caveat, I'm not a doctor. And, I think there's a really good argument to be made that somebody smarter than me medically says Rodgers is okay and there's not a lot of danger. Maybe they should let him play. I understand that. It's a very fair argument to make. But I can't help but think to a similar scenario that happened about 26 years ago. I believe the year was 1997, and it was another iconic player, Jerry Rice, who suffered another devastating, what should have been a season-ending injury He was, of course, the iconic San Francisco 49ers receiver, and then at the end of the career, he played with the Raiders and the Seahawks. But Rice suffered a torn ACL week 1 of the season in '97. And he was just an incredible athlete. He had an incredible workout regimen. He made it a goal to get back by the end of the season. And he did. He actually returned in December of that year and promptly re-injured himself. And Rice has said that he felt like he came back too soon. He should not have come back while he was injured. That he just should have taken the time. And I keep thinking that's probably comparable, because at least the medical people I know, and I know Rodgers is using this speed bridge technique, but you wonder, like, it's one thing to be on the field, kind of just throwing the ball around, maybe moving a little bit before a game. It's another to withstand an NFL game, especially on the MetLife turf, by the way. So I just worry about the potential for him to get re-injured. But I think the other relevant question is, what are you coming back for? It would be one thing if the Jets were over 500 right now. If they were in playoff position, I could see a decent argument to be made to bring Rodgers back. And, if the Jets surprise us and win a couple of games and we get to Christmas Eve and they're like right there, if they're tied for the last playoff spot or maybe even one game back, we could have a discussion. But I don't think any of us are expecting that right now. I think a lot of us believe that this season is probably lost. So the question comes, what are you bringing Rodgers back for? Are you bringing him back for meaningless games? Are you going to potentially risk him re-injuring it, having another long offseason of rehab for meaningless games? And also, the Jets can't protect him right now. This offensive line is a disaster. And maybe they get Dwayne Brown back. Maybe they get Mekhi Becton back. That doesn't make me feel a whole lot better, because even if Rodgers is healthy enough to go, this was a guy who had declining mobility even coming into the season, even before this injury. And, Achilles injuries for quarterbacks, one thing they really do impact is your mobility. Rodgers is going to have as good of an arm as he's ever had, or at least as close to as good of an arm as he's ever had. He'll be as smart as he ever was. But I don't think he's going to be able to move much. I don't think he's going to be very mobile. I think that's probably going to be true the rest of his career. I mean, I've seen other quarterbacks come back from this injury, and they could be effective, but it does definitely limit their mobility, especially at Rodgers' age. So he's not going to be able to move. He'll be able to slide within the pocket. Maybe he'll learn some from Tom Brady, who was the master of maneuvering within the pocket without great mobility. But, the days of him consistently breaking the pocket, one of the things that made him so special, moving left, moving right, throwing on the run, and with his arm strength, throwing an absolute dart on the run, that's probably over. And I don't think the Jets can protect him this year. Now, in the offseason, we can talk about moves that they might make on the offensive line. But this offensive line experiment, what the Jets tried, they rolled the dice on guys that they had. It's completely failed. And it was failing even before guys got injured. And now you're throwing guys out there who are practice squad level players. And, it sounds like Rodgers is coming back next year. But at some point, you have to wonder, is it worth throwing him out there when you got him coming back next year, and we're going to try and do this again next year, and we'll probably have a better shot because this season's probably gone? I think at some point you need to make that calculation. Yeah, it would be exciting to have him come back. It'd be an incredible story if he came back and played well a couple months after the injury. But what are the Jets really accomplishing? The Super Bowl is gone. The Super Bowl was probably gone the second he had suffered that injury week 1 against Buffalo. The playoffs are probably gone now too. I don't see what the benefit is of him going out there and playing. I think a lot of people are going to agree with me on this one. And this is a completely different discussion if the Jets had maintained that pace of the first 6 games. But I think you go with probably Trevor Siemian, but I don't think you go with Aaron Rodgers moving forward. As exciting as it would be, and look, it's going to make this offense a lot worse. It's going to, maybe the one chance the offense would have a boost is Rodgers returning, but I think you got to lose the battle this year to try and win the war next year. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to the rookie class. If we can't get excited for Aaron Rodgers' return, maybe we can see some of the rookies start to make strides. And we'll discuss that in more detail as we continue this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. You should not have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. Let me tell you a story. On Saturday night, I was having dinner with my sister in Manhattan. It was around 5 o'clock or so. We were talking and we said, let's check it out. Maybe we want to see something on Broadway. So I told her, I talk about this app on my podcast all the time. I should put my money where my mouth is. Let's see how good the deals are. I found a deal for tickets to the Broadway musical Six, which is about Henry VIII's six wives. It's an amazing show. I highly recommend it. But on the Gametime app, I found third row center tickets for a price that usually doesn't get you in a Broadway theater. I mean, I couldn't get over how cheap it was, how easy it was to use. Gametime really came through for me on Saturday, and it can come through for you too. They have, again, tickets to sports events. So you want to go see the Jets play the Falcons this Sunday, music, comedy, theater, you name it, Gametime has it. And now you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and then bonus episodes as needed. You should also know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. And today on Locked On Jets, we're talking about things to look forward to over the final 6 games of the season. The Jets sit at 4-7 right now, 11 games down, 6 to go. It's one of those seasons you wish there were only 16 games, because I don't know, we won't really want to watch the Jets that much more. But there are some interesting things to watch. And I think one of the things worth watching is what the rookie class can do. This is a rookie class that hasn't done a whole lot just yet. Joe Tippmann has stepped in as the starting center. He played a little guard earlier this season, but you really haven't seen these rookies get much activity. And I think you could begin by talking about the first round pick, Will McDonald, who, was actually been a healthy scratch earlier this season. He started to see his playing time, tick up a little bit. And there's been some positivity the last couple of weeks. I mean, you saw him generate a couple pressures against Buffalo. He was in on a couple of plays against Miami. Now, look, I think you're still trying to win these games. You still have 2 very young, talented edge rushers in Bryce Huff and Jermaine Johnson, but the Jets have a lot of snaps to go around on the defensive line. And, over the next couple of games, it would be fun to see McDonald start to get more action. I think maybe he's starting, limited number of snaps, so I don't want to go crazy. I don't want to go overboard, but maybe he's starting to put the pieces together. You have Tippmann on the offensive line, who I think got off to a pretty good start. I don't think he's been quite as effective over the last few games. Now, of course, he missed a couple of games because of the injury he suffered against the Giants. Then Connor McGovern's injury forced him to move to center. I wish Tippmann was playing better, but you know what? This is actually a good situation right now because the pressure is really kind of off him right at the moment. I think that, he's going to get some reps, and the Jets are kind of out of the playoff race now. So it's an opportunity for him to kind of work with low pressure situation, a chance to kind of learn how to play center in the NFL. And in the offseason will be interesting because the Jets will have a decision to make on Tippmann, and part of it might come down to how he does the rest of the season, because I feel like there's an argument to be made. Maybe he belongs at guard. I thought he actually was better at guard than he's been at center so far, but center is a position you got to learn. You have more responsibility. You're kind of making the line calls. You're working with the quarterback to make sure you're in the right protection or the right run blocking scheme on every play. Because you're trying to figure out what the defensive fronts are doing. So it'll be interesting to see how Tippmann does the rest of the way. You'd like to see him play well at center. If he doesn't, then I think he's got a spot somewhere on this line. I do believe this is going to be a player who starts for a long time for the Jets and does pretty well. A guy I think the Jets have to get into the mix is Anaconda. I mean, look, Breece is great. I love Breece Hall. I'm still mad at Robert Saleh. I said it yesterday. I'm still mad at Robert Saleh for calling out Breece Hall. I thought that was a ridiculous thing to do by Saleh. Of course, I've kind of soured on Saleh myself, and that's been something that's been happening over the course of the last couple of months. Even if you go to like preseason, I was telling you that I was becoming a Saleh skeptic based on a lot of things I saw last year. But it drives me crazy that Saleh goes out and criticizes Breece Hall, and when he's defending Dalvin Cook nonstop, when he's defending every bad piece of this offense, he criticizes like one of his 2 good players. But Breece is going to need a rest. I don't think Dalvin Cook needs any more carries. I think we've seen all we need to see out of Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook is finished. It was a signing that, look, I have to admit I was wrong on. I thought it was going to work out better than it did. I really thought that Dalvin and Breece could be an elite 1-2 punch at the running back position. You got the one in Dalvin, but you don't have the two in the two. I'm sorry, you have the one in Brees. You don't have the two in Dalvin. So it's time for Izzy Abanikanda to get into the lineup. I think that it's kind of odd to me that they're using the excuse that they're using, which is essentially Izzy's not strong in pass protection, when, there aren't really backs who are good in pass protection on this team right now. That's not Brees' strength is not in the passing game. I mean, I don't think he's a great pass protector. I don't think he's a great receiver. Now, on the balls he catches, he can, once he got the ball in his hands, he's very dangerous. But Dalvin Cook has historically never been a particularly strong pass protector. So I don't get why you're criticizing Izzy. You're saying he can't be in the game. This is Jets offense in need of a spark. This is Jets offense in need of some speed, some home run ability. Only two guys really have it right now. That's Garrett and Brees. So why not add this third guy? Let's add Izzy into the lineup. Let's give him a shot, especially on the plays where Brees needs a break. And honestly, as the Jets fall further and further out of the playoff race, you may just want to reduce Brees' carries anyway, because running backs do have a career odometer, and I don't know how many carries I want to burn on Brees Hall for a lost season. So it'd be an opportunity for Izzy Abanikanda to get his carries up. So those are guys I have my eye on going forward. It's always exciting near the end of the season to see what rookies have the ability to do. I think that's always something you should watch for, especially in a lost season when you can start getting young players some experience. I think that's a general best practice, especially in December once your team's not really a threat in the playoff race. But these aren't the only guys I have my eye on. I think there are other players the Jets could try and help develop as we go through the final 6 weeks of the season. As we continue this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about some of the others. There are a couple other guys who I think could step up and take on a bigger role. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Again, that's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. If you want to take that $5 moneyline bet to try and get $150, well, the Jets are 3-point underdogs at home to the Atlanta Falcons this coming Sunday. Now, I don't know why you'd have much faith in the Jets at this point. They're not a team that's playing very well. They're not a team that looks like a threat to win much of anything. But if you still somehow believe in the Jets, that could be the game to bet on. And the app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options. It includes spreads. So if you want to bet on the Jets, you can do that. But it also includes player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. Again, it's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. On this Tuesday, we're talking about the final 6 games of the NFL season for the Jets. Doesn't look like they're going to be competing for a playoff spot unless they go out and surprise us the next couple of weeks. Jets have fallen far out of the playoff race. They're actually 15th place in a 16-team conference. Still only 2 games out of the last spot. They have to jump an awful lot of teams and not much time to make up those 2 games. So I think really the Jets are probably playing out the string for the rest of the season. And that means you're kind of looking for guys to step up and show you that they have an opportunity to be contributors next season. So it's about trying to kind of uncover some hidden gems. And I'm going to cheat a little bit here because I'm going to name a couple of rookies, even though we talked about rookies in the last segment. But in the last segment, we're talking about guys we're expecting to be pretty good. You expect your first round pick to be good every year. You're expecting your second round pick to be good. And even like a day 3 running back, you can reasonably think that there's a shot he's going to be a player for you. Now we're going to talk about some unheralded guys. And I think you have to look at the receiver position. Outside of Garrett Wilson, this position has been a complete failure this year. I mean, let's look at what's going on after Garrett. You have Allen Lazard, who's a healthy scratch. This was your big free agent signing of the offseason. Aaron Rodgers was a trade. So I understand Rodgers was the big addition. Allen Lazard was the big free agent signing of the offseason. He's a healthy scratch. Randall Cobb has 3 catches all season long. He was supposed to be the number 3 receiver. Mecole Hardman was supposed to be the number 4 receiver. He got traded. So I don't think there's been a team with a worse 2-3-4 than the Jets this year. If you were looking at what the lineup was opening day, name me a team that has a worse group than that. Healthy scratch, 3 catches, traded. That's awful. I mean, it's ridiculous. So there's an opportunity here for a couple of young, unheralded receivers. And I look at Jason Brownlee, who actually stepped into the starting lineup last week and, had a couple catches. And then Xavier Gipson, who's seen his playing time kind of increase as we gotten deeper into the season. And look, these are undrafted rookies. There's going to be growing pains, but an opportunity for them to get reps, and maybe one of them can turn into a player. It's not impossible to have an undrafted free agent turn into a pretty good receiver. Robbie Anderson did it. He turned into a good starting receiver for the Jets all those years ago. And I think for players like this, reps will help. Now, I think, looking back, I remember when the 53-man roster came out, people talked about how many undrafted free agent receivers the Jets had, and they viewed that as a sign of great scouting. Well, as we now know, it probably was a sign that the receiver position wasn't that good. But a real opportunity now for these guys to kind of step up. Somebody's got to, take that second spot after Garrett. And objectively speaking, it's probably not going to be one of these guys, but, you try and find the hidden gems where you can. Maybe a guy who's not such a hidden gem, but I'd love to see Jeremy Ruckert take over the starting tight end role. Uzama's been okay as a blocker. Conklin's had his moments as a receiver this year. I'll say this. I've been a heavy critic of Jets tight ends. I remain a heavy critic of Jets tight ends. I don't think these guys are very good, but they've been not as maybe better than they were last year. I still think they're way overpaid. That said, Ruckert hopefully is the future at the tight end position. I think he can do everything Conklin and Uzama can do. He's younger. I think he's got more upside. So I'd like to see Ruckert take on a bigger role for this team on offense. And to be honest with you, at this point, the Jets should just should just be trying new things at the skill positions. It's not an accident that I've named how many receivers? 2 receivers, a running back, and a tight end. The Jets have gotten so little out of their skill groups this year that they ought to just be trying new guys. They ought to see if these guys that they saw something in, they brought them in because they either drafted them recently or because they saw something to bring them in as an undrafted free agent. Might as well give them a shot, because it's not like you have a whole lot else going on at these positions on offense. So I think that's something that makes sense. I just see a lot of logic in that. And, maybe, who knows, maybe somebody can provide some sort of spark on offense. The Jets offense has been as bad as any offense in the NFL this year. In fact, they are setting records for futility, depending on which metric you think is important. It's really bad right now. So the hope is that, so you give these young guys experience. And first of all, they show you something. But second of all, they use these reps and they build on it, and maybe something good happens down the line. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think, but that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you like this show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Hope you have a great Tuesday, everybody. Please send in your mailbag questions. Tomorrow we'll do our weekly mailbag show. I can't wait to talk to you then.